Wow, it's quite an honor to be a slice of sandwich meat in between John Connolly and George Chamberlain, I can tell you that. Two of the most fantastic leaders this industry has ever been privileged to have. And it is my distinct pleasure and honor to present the Wallace R. Stevens Lifetime Achievement Award to my dear friend, my co-conspirator, and an amazing, dedicated, and visionary leader, Dr. George Chamberlain. Let me see if I can get this going right. All right. So, see if I'm doing this right here. There we go. So George and Bill. George and I met when he was still a researcher at Texas A&M, and I was running operations and purchasing at CPAC. George and I kind of connected immediately. We were fascinated with each other's knowledge, experience, and our perspectives, and our love for the seafood industry and aquaculture in particular at that time. I also learned that George was a buyer of the cheapest, cramped economy, coach class, late night tickets of any human being I had ever seen. And as a typical kind of absent-minded professor type, George didn't lose just hours, he lost days. George's roots, his mom and dad were Marines in World War II, and for any of you with military in your family, you kind of probably have a little bit of a sense for what that means. Family was all about faith and discipline and hard work. The dad was a fighter pilot, and the mom was a Morse code interpreter. So they were probably able to kind of keep a good close eye on the shenanigans that I'm sure George conducted when he was young. George learned teamwork through high school, college, and sports. He played football, baseball in high school, and then he rode crew in college. During those hard-working summers, when George was drilling wells and working on the high steel on a large building, I think he also learned the value of education, and it gave him an appreciation for how he might build his career. He got a scholarship to his hometown university of Jacksonville University. Then he went on to Texas A&M, where he had both an assistantship and a fellowship. During his time at Texas A&M, George produced 40 peer-reviewed papers, not a small amount. But probably the most important thing was George fell in love with aquaculture there. Okay, there we go. After college, George joined Purina, where he managed the aquaculture business in 12 different countries, covering dozens of both marine and freshwater species. He developed new feeds based on upgraded feed quality ingredients and improved manufacturing technology, and he offered technical assistance to the folks that were using the feeds and growing the product. When Monsanto called him a little later and asked him to head up a program for developing proprietary breeding and advanced grow-out systems, George moved. And a little later, the Monsanto program, which was supposed to merge with another company to create this behemoth, the merger failed. And so George, being the smart guy that he is, he took all of the work that he developed and nurtured at Monsanto, and he went and created his own business. He developed a shrimp breeding operation initially in Malaysia, then Brunei, and ultimately in Kona, Hawaii. And a few years ago, he sold that business to the Hendrix Genetics Group. So, having had a successful professional career wasn't enough for George. He wanted to make a difference. In 1990, he decided it was time to begin giving back to the World Aquaculture Society, a society which had meant a lot to him during his days as an academic. He served for 7 years as director, secretary, treasurer, VP, president, and past president. During his term as president, he hosted the first meeting of WAS in Asia, its first seafood show. He commissioned its Asia Pacific chapter, which, by the way, is now larger than the U.S. chapter. As he was winding down his WAS service, a crisis was developing in the shrimp farming world. We talked about that a little earlier tonight. Environmental NGOs became concerned about mangrove destruction through conversion of mangroves into shrimp farms, as well as discharge of effluents, diseases, and a whole host of other environmental issues. The NGOs began to describe aquaculture as unsustainable. And in 1996, events kind of reached a crisis point. The Supreme Court of India passed a ruling to close all shrimp farms within 500 meters of the high tide line. The Natural Resources Defense Council and a number of other NGOs hosted self-proclaimed shrimp tribunals at the UN. And other NGOs called for consumer boycotts. So then in 1997, at the WAS meeting, full circle back here to Seattle, George led a discussion about creating an organization to respond to both the technical issues and the negative media reaction. This led to an organizing meeting that George and I hosted at Darden headquarters when I worked there, an industry meeting that George led down in Honduras with a number of the growers to validate the concept that was being proposed, and finally it led to the incorporation of GAA that same year. In the beginning, the organization had virtually no funding, but it did gather strong support from a number of industry leaders and volunteers who were strongly energized by the mission, same mission that we're here for today. A board was formed. George was elected president, which he is to this day. We had all begun building support for both the marketplace and industry, with George taking the lead. He initiated the development of the codes of practice for aquaculture, which ultimately became the basis for BAP standards, and he also initiated the research on what was depleting mangroves. And as John Connolly alluded to earlier, that wasn't really the problem. And finances, oh my God, what a struggle that was. I used to say every month, we're just going to wind up paying Visa with MasterCard because there's no money in the bank. In the first years, GAA was run out of the Chamberlain's living room, with George's wife Susan managing the administration, including the membership, taxes, bookkeeping, and publishing the magazine. And for George's vacation, he and Susan used their family van to haul a pop-up booth in the most recent magazine to GAA's first Boston Seafood Show. Their daughters, Sarah and Cassie, helped man the booth. GAA ultimately outgrew the Chamberlain living room and then leased a small office in St. Louis behind a liquor store, which seems appropriate given the number of headaches the organization was experiencing. George and Susan's two sons, who we're grateful to have here today, Brian, a computer science student, built, maintained, installed, and upgraded a server that lasted us for 10 years. Jordan, an art major, helped with the GAA logo design, goal photography, video, and database systems. And during this period, numerous multi-state child labor laws were violated repeatedly. GAA needed to get the word out, so we settled on having an international conference to bring the stakeholders together. They were originally called GSOL, or the Global Shrimp Outlook, but that ultimately evolved to GOAL, the Global Outlook for Aquaculture Leadership. The annual meetings were held in numerous exotic and interesting locations and evolved to become the place to be to get the latest information on aquaculture production issues and solutions. GOAL brought the marketplace and the industry together to collaborate on how to build a more sustainable future together. These meetings were also a place to meet other industry leaders in a relaxed setting and where so many important long-term relationships have been forged. George led the standards development team and participated in the first auditor training courses in Ecuador and in Malaysia. In 2005, George worked with Walmart and myself at Darden, which both adopted BAP standards in 2006. The SOC, which had 1/3 NGOs, 1/3 scientists, and 1/3 industry, to manage standards and to collaborate and agree on them. And that, ladies and gentlemen, led to incredibly rapid growth of the certification program. In 2007, GAA had grown exponentially, and there was need for more specialization. George traveled constantly, recruiting new members, new industry supporters, and then Wally was recruited to become the CEO and to help lead the business side and to further refine the business model to make it more sustainable. And what a great partnership that has become. So, how did all this work out? Number of marketplace endorsers from people who couldn't even spell GAA is now 219 of the most respected marketers in the world, and I'm going to have a little bit more clarification on that in a minute. Number of facilities certified globally, 2,930. Annual revenues over 17 million, and gentlemen and ladies, we have a fortress balance sheet, so no more Visa paid with MasterCard. And oh, by the way, that global shrimp farm production that was under such threat back in the days of the mangrove challenges, in 1997, total aquaculture shrimp production was about 1.7 billion pounds. 2021, it's only 600% in growth. And if we paid attention to Gordon's slides a little earlier, it seems like we may have a little bit more in front of us. And then the GSA was created to cover all of seafood. In the strategic discussions that we have to try to decide where we're going to take the future, George is the one that pounded the table for moving in this direction. He believed that all the work we'd done building trust with the marketplace and trust with the industry would lead us to be successful in working with the Wild Harvest side as well. This is a list of the marketplace endorsers who support GAA, GSA standards and mission. George believes, when we discussed the GAA concept, that this would be an incredibly important part of the work that GSA now has to do in working to promote RFM and other Wild Harvest standards. Sadly, in 2012, George's wife Susan passed away. The kids were grown and had already moved away, So George did what he always does. He threw himself even deeper into work. He traveled about 70% of his time, the international stage, building GAA. And eventually, though, George was very fortunate to find the lovely Miss Lisa and to get married in 2017. Next year, he plans to reduce his work schedule to half-time. And so a little of George's math, he works 80 hours a week today. So I suspect he'll probably cut back to about 65 as his half-time program. But to move to the Center for Responsible Seafood, where George can conduct research, just as he did with the mangroves, to advance the cause of both aquaculture and wild harvest. And we expect that most of those 15 hours that he cuts his work schedule back are going to be devoted to Lisa and the four children and five grandchildren that they enjoy. So George, who is celebrating his 25th year this year, exemplifies the criteria for GSA lifetime achievement if anyone ever does. In the words of the anthropologist Margaret Mead, never doubt what a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can do to change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And George always deflects credit to others, as he has frequently done to me. But this is really the story of the chicken and the pig, which George has, by the way, heard a few times. A chicken and his friend the pig are walking by a restaurant, and in the window reads a sign that says, "Wanted, ham and eggs." So the chicken looks at the pig and says, "Pig, let's go in and apply. That's perfect for us." The pig looks at the chicken and says, "Chicken, my friend, from you they want a contribution. From me they want total commitment." So George has represented total commitment to GAA and GSA. And George, without your vision, your unique skill set, your drive, your tenacity, your willingness to violate multiple child labor laws, neither GAA or GSA would exist without you. Please join me in giving George a standing ovation.
Thank you, everyone. I think I'm going to follow Emily's advice. What was it? Be quick, be clear, explain the why. So, and get to the conclusion right away. So the conclusion for me is that, one little person doing one little thing makes absolutely no difference. And even GAA or GSA now, working as hard as it can, makes no difference. It's really you guys. It's the global seafood community and what you've done. We've just been conveners. I've just find that the way things have materialized from zero, to what we are today as an industry is just, I can only think of one word. It's just magical. It's almost impossible. When you think of how we started, I remember sitting around the table with Bill and a few other people. What should we call this group? Well, there's World Aquaculture Society. We can't call it world because they already have that. Let's say global, And okay, aquaculture is good. And then what's another word? Alliance. We had no clue. And we were only starting with shrimp. And we went bankrupt multiple times. We didn't have enough money to pay people. And it always seemed like you can imagine you're like walking the plank on a ship, and there's this wooden plank, and your next step is going to send you over the edge, and somehow the plank gets longer, and you can take that step. And then again and again, it's miraculous. And to me, one of the things I quickly learned were what I like to think of are the hidden spheres of influence. We may have this little organizational chart within GSA that shows how things work, but then there are you guys and your ability to move things in ways that are magical. And I want to say that I haven't just enjoyed the journey. It's much more personal. I love you people. I love the community. I love visiting farms, hatcheries, processing plants, vessels. I just have fallen in love with this world we are in, and I believe in it. And so, thinking, of the next steps, we've done this great job and we've organized this entity and we've crossed many, many hurdles. But then when I look forward, maybe I'm delusional, but when I look forward at growing population, the food demand, the pressures of climate change that are already getting way ahead of us, and the fact that food production is exacerbating climate change and we have to change the way we do things. The challenges that lie ahead are far, far greater than the ones that we've already passed. But I think we have a great foundation. We have a great team. We have an amazing story and product and ability to deal with these issues. And so our generation is, I feel like I heard former President Obama say once that all you can do is take that baton when it's your turn and you run the race as fast as you can, as well as you can, and then you hand it off. And then it's up to the next generation to keep going. And I think we have just an amazing opportunity and a great new generation coming, and a remarkable opportunity that lies ahead of us that we could have never dreamed of when we started. I want to thank each of you. I've so much enjoyed working with you, and I'm going to stay active. And we have this it's not new, we have a nonprofit organization that GSA helped fund called the Center for Responsible Seafood, and it works on research and education, and it's kind of stuff I love. A lot of it will be helping very smallholder, poor farmers and fishermen, helping education and help lift them, but also working on the leading edge, the latest innovations. So I'm not done yet, and I feel like as long as my health holds and I feel great, I'd like to keep running the race a little longer. And I look forward to working with you, and thank you, each of you, for all the support, the friendship, the love over all these years. Thank you.